Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another exciting edition of Media Monitor, live on SABC's news channel, Channel 404. I'm Peter Dora, your host, and this is what you can expect from us in the next hour right here on the program. Now, consulting firm Cambridge Analytica closed down after a Facebook data harvesting scandal. Africa is holding its first ever summit of the World Media Economics and Management Conference, WEMEC, and we'll bring you an update later on the show about that. Also, WhatsApp CEO Jan Koum resigned after a fallout with Facebook following disagreements over the privacy of user data. Should we be worried? We'll get to the bottom of that. Still with tech news, Twitter urged users to change their passwords after a bug had been discovered. They say that it's not a problem, but it is a concern, isn't it? Highlighting the need for media freedom, we speak to two exiled journalists from our neighboring countries about the complexities of being a journalist in their homelands, and I would say in a large part of the continent as well. We'll take a sneak preview of our Sunday newspapers with exiled Swazi journalists, as well as speak to him about his defunct newspaper, the Swaziland Shopping, how it came about and the reasons why it was censored, and who that person that was at the center of it all. Not too many people know what the Office of the Public Advocate is and what it does, so stay tuned for that. It could be useful to you at one stage, and so we'll be speaking to Joe Latahomo about his role as a public advocate. So a packed show, lots to look forward to. Please stay tuned, and let's catch you up now. First of all, with the newspapers, the Sunday newspapers, what's on the front pages of those. Let's take a sneak peek on what those headlines are saying, starting with the Sunday Times. The Sunday Times heads with a story about how suspended SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane, who is refusing to step down, wants to drag President Cyril Ramaphosa to court following a heated shouting match over millions of rands that SARS paid to the Gupta family. The City Press is running with a story about how another race row has rocked the DA after senior party leaders took Mmusi Maimane to task over his comments on white privilege. But this time Maimane is feeling the heat from his three most senior colleagues in Parliament. The Sunday Independent is leading with a story about how former SAA board members were paid hundreds of thousands of rand in directors' fees despite the national carrier suffering billions of rands in losses. The Sunday Tribune is leading with a story about how 2 weeks ago, after a well-known Durban North gardener who was an 18-time Comrades Marathon runner had been knocked out in a fatal hit-and-run accident, and there's still no police report on the matter. The Weekend Argus is leading with a story about Sean Bloch, who found his aged parents murdered in the Mowbray home. Bloch explained how the 9 a.m. yesterday he found his mother Rosalie Bloch, 84, and his stepfather Aubrey Jackson, 96, tied up and strangled. And internationally, the Swaziland Sunday Observer is leading with a story about confusion over Prime Minister Sibusiso Barnabas Dlamini's house, which is to be built once he retires. The confusion is on whether the state of the Premier has to purchase the land on which the house is built on. And Nigeria's Daily Trust leads with a story about how protests, sacking of party officers, bickering and ballot box snatching characterized the ward congresses of the All Progressives Congress that was held across the country yesterday. All right, so that's your Sunday papers, and we'll take a look at those again in more detail during the course of the program. But in the meantime, let's take a look at this big story. World leaders and researchers of media management and media business meet in South Africa for a 4-day summit starting today to take a critical look at threats and opportunities for a sustainable African and global media industry, and to map out the ingredients for a robustly independent, credible and relevant journalism in a world sapped by news noise and information. Well, talking to us from our Cape Town studios about the significance of this summit is the host and conference director of the World Media Economics and Management Conference. He's also the head of Rhodes University's Sol Plaatje Institute for Media Leadership. Francis Mdlongwa joins us now from our studios in Cape Town. Thanks very much for joining us. A very good morning to you, and I'm sure that this being a first on the continent, you're very excited about the conference, but tell us about the summit and why it's so important.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having me, and good morning to your viewers. Well, this summit is not only historic in the sense that it's coming to Africa for the very first time, but really the more important aspect is the fact that it's looking at how mainstream media can be made more sustainable, indeed also the quality of journalism which is being offered at a time when media companies are losing not only their audiences, but their advertisers, who have been the financial backbone of these media companies. What we are looking at these days is a situation where, as well as media convergence, which has allowed telecoms companies, has allowed computing companies to begin to be media companies themselves, what we are having is a situation where increasingly international technological companies such as Google, such as Facebook, and so on, are taking over literally the business of media companies. That is what the summit is focusing on, to try and explore ways of strengthening the media, as well as ensuring that the media continues to play a critical part in producing credible journalism which people can use.
All right, so, I'm curious in terms of where we are in history in the world, what's different, because at one point we had the printing press, and that, I suppose, introduced us to mass media. Then radio came along, printing press and print didn't disappear. Then television came along, radio didn't disappear. And I'm just wondering, television came, and I'm wondering, as we enter this digital space, what is it about this new environment that's been such a threat to things that have survived for hundreds and hundreds of years?
Indeed, thank you for mapping that out. Let me put it this way. If you look at the history of journalism, it started something like 5 centuries ago, especially when newspapers were launched. They were able to survive. At the time, they were based mostly on selling the newspapers. In other words, the business was based on selling of the newspaper itself. But later on, as the situation evolved, then these newspapers were then to be able to find advertisers who were to fund them, essentially. And this has been what has been going on for literally the last century or so. Of course, we've had radio initially, and then we've had television. Newspapers were able to actually overcome, or at least work hand in hand with the radios as well as the television stations. They seem to have underestimated the advent of the internet when it came. What the internet has essentially done is to, one, ensure that people are getting free content, which itself was a critical strategic mistake made by newspapers and other media organizations, which just put their content up on websites without thinking about how to monetize, in other words, how to make money out of those new audiences they were serving. So that was one. But critical now, what is happening with especially the technological giants such as Google, such as Facebook, such as Apple, these have set up their specific news platforms. For example, Facebook has what we call instant articles. You have Google, which has got Google, the accelerated, mobile pages. Apple has got Apple News. They are now beginning to add value in terms of the news content itself. They are beginning to be involved in actually disseminating the content not only to local audiences, but critically to global audiences. Advertisers who used to support media companies, that is stations such as the SABC, any other media organizations in the print and so on, their advertising has been whittled down as it moves to where the audiences are. Audiences are with these digital media platforms, which I'm talking about. So they are threatening the survival of media companies.
But isn't it a question of you need to reinvent yourselves as media houses, change your business model, and join the platform economy?
Sorry, the audio is not very good here. I didn't quite get that.
I'm just saying, isn't it about you changing your business model? So instead of, using the traditional methods, how do you run a business in a digital format? Isn't that what the issue is, really, is how do you make money in a different way?
Precisely, you could say that, but it's much more complex than simply saying how to make money in a digital and social media environment. You see, here is a situation where media companies themselves, which have existed in the analog world, which I've just explained, must now find novel, new ways of surviving in this environment where they are facing a competition not only from these international technological companies, but they are facing competition even from audiences themselves who are producing, content. So what this conference, therefore, is going to be looking at are new strategies, new business models of mainstream media having to cope with this rapid change which is taking place.
All right, Mr. Dlongwa, now we have to leave it there for the time being. Hopefully we can chat to you again after the conference just to get a sense of what's come out and perhaps give us an indication of what lies ahead. But thank you very much for your time and good luck with the opening this evening. Okay, that was Francis Mdlongwa, who is this evening at 6:30. Patricia de Lille, the Mayor of Cape Town, will be officially opening this summit. Right, now before we delve into our next story, let's take a quick look at this story, and it should be of interest to you actually. It affects us all.
Controversial consulting firm Cambridge Analytica is closing down following a massive scandal over its mining of Facebook profile data during the 2016 elections. The company said both Cambridge Analytica and its parent, SCL Elections, will cease all operations immediately, with bankruptcy proceedings to begin soon. The company became the center of a global firestorm in recent months after it was revealed Cambridge had improperly accessed the data of 87 million Facebook users while working for President Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. The scandal proved hugely embarrassing for Facebook. Its founder, Mark Zuckerberg, hauled before Congress to explain the massive breach of privacy. He swore to lawmakers the company would take steps to make sure it never happened again. Cambridge said it had been losing clients and facing mounting legal fees in the wake of the scandal.
All right, so that's just one of the stories that has been kind of doing the rounds and of concern to us because it's our data and our lives that's being mined. It certainly has been a busy week in the tech space. Messaging Unit WhatsApp co-founder and CEO Jan Koum announced on his Facebook page that he's leaving the social media platform. Another social networking service, Twitter, advised its more than 300 million users to change their passwords after an internal leak. To talk to us about these issues, we're now joined by Nelisa Ngolana, who's from PR Trends. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the program. So this is quite a lot of stuff that's happening, and in some way it involves us as consumers of these social media platforms. What's going on, do you think?
Well, with regards to Jan Koum leaving Facebook, it's a lot around what's been happening to do with the data privacy issues that Facebook's had over the last little while. When Jan talks about the principles behind the founding of WhatsApp, he often he's very much an advocate for piracy and privacy, and also very much about WhatsApp was never about it's a messaging app. It's about connecting people to each other, and has never really believed in the idea that you should use that captive audience as a way of making money. As a result, for WhatsApp, for example, you pay to download it. In other parts of the world, they pay to download it, so they pay an annual subscription fee. So that's how they've managed. It
was 90 cents or something.
Yes, 99 cents, yeah. So that's how they've monetized the audience, as opposed to, obviously, Facebook, who obviously makes a lot of money by the fact that they have these huge volumes of data and people's profiles, and they use, obviously, targeted advertising.
Okay, so my understanding of this, look, Facebook see WhatsApp, they see, wow, this is great.
This is great.
They paid 19 billion for this, but WhatsApp was only making 20 million a year, I think, by the time that it was being bought.
Sure.
So how on earth can Facebook make money from WhatsApp? And I suppose this is where the pressure started happening.
I think this is where obviously the disagreement between the two. Obviously, when Facebook made that decision, for them it was primarily to buy their competition out, because WhatsApp was growing quite exponentially at the time, but also to kind of incorporate them into their bigger ecosystem, because now they're able to get all of that data from WhatsApp and link it to their platform, which means now they've got richer data to sell, which means they've got far more. So as a result of that, I mean, it looks from that it's clearly an ethical decision and a principled decision from Jan, but also the other co-founder, Brian Acton of WhatsApp, quit Facebook as well last year. So it's been on
and he's put money into a rival Signal, hasn't he?
Yes.
All right. You know what? Should we be worried as WhatsApp users?
Generally, we should be. I think it's good to understand what happens with our data, where it goes, and how it's used, and whether we are protected, because there's a very thin line between ethics and legality that platforms such as Facebook are obviously skirting, and that should worry us.
One of the things that we don't do is that they say we're updating terms and conditions. Nobody reads them, but it seems to me like we really need to start reading these things.
No, we absolutely need to. I mean, as a result, when Twitter announced their data, the glitch, I don't think a lot of people paid attention to what that actually means. So we need to be a little bit more vigilant in terms of, you have our data, how are you using it, and also understanding how are we protected in the face of all of that.
Did Zuckerberg get off lightly? He appeared before this Congress, this congressional hearing, but he seemed like he just got a nice little chat, and that was it.
I think he got off lightly, but I think from an ethics perspective, once again, business is no longer just about the value of your stock, like your tangible assets. It's really about the intangible things, such as your brand reputation and the ethics around how you do business. Yes, you might have won the intellectual fight, but I don't think he won, you know, the greater goodwill that he should have. And it's surprising for me, though, that people haven't been as outraged as they should be.
Yeah, no, because we just carry on, don't we?
We're still posting.
We must change our passwords. They said, though, that they don't think that there's been a compromise, but just for safety, change your password. That doesn't sound good.
We have to trust what they say, absolutely. But, you know, the way that Twitter is set up is just a little bit different from Facebook. You know, our data is not as compromised normally as it would be on Facebook, but it's still something to worry about. As soon as a company says, yes, change your passwords, we should be worried. Why is that? But we're not questioning.
Okay, you know, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for waking us up, I think, because I think sometimes we sleepwalk into danger, and this digital space really, really needs our attention now. Terms and conditions, any changes, and when a company buys for 19 billion, you must know they're going to use it somehow. All right, but thanks so much for your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to start looking at press freedom, and we'll talk to journalists that have found themselves in exile as a result of hard times at home.
Yes.
Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m.
Good morning, you're still watching Media Monitor. Thanks for tuning in. Now, the media fraternity gathered in Ghana, in Accra, to mark the 25th UNESCO celebration of World Press Freedom Day. Now, this year's global theme was Keeping Power in Check, Media, Justice and the Rule of Law, and covered issues of media and the transparency of political processes, the independence and media literacy of the judicial system. Now, and also the accountability of state institutions towards the public, and more on this. Let's take a look at this little insert before we chat about it.
There was a clarion but simple call here. Journalists need to be free to do their work. But increasingly, media professionals are the victims of unjust laws, imprisonment and murder, as was the case when 10 were killed in attacks in Afghanistan earlier this week.
None of the reporters in this room are afraid of being attacked right now. But the situation is quite different in the rest of the world. Just this week, as we just heard, for example, at least 10 journalists were killed in Afghanistan. That brings the total amount of journalists killed in 2018 to 32, and we are not even halfway through this year. We cannot become complacent to these kind of attacks. They cannot become the new normal. We must also remember that the safety of journalists is not just an issue in war zones. Journalists can be murdered anywhere, in any of our countries.
A report by UNESCO on world trends in freedom of expression and media development finds that media independence is weakening and that professional standards of journalism are being eroded by economic forces and a lack of recognition by political actors, among others. While social media and the dissemination and manipulation of false information or propaganda is also flagged as a major concern. While an intensification towards populism and identity politics has also created a climate of fear towards traditional media.
We're seeing growing authoritarian tendencies that are often closing spaces, and this has a significant impact on press freedom and the safety of journalists. So a recent Gallup poll of citizens in 131 countries across the world suggested that there's a general perception of declining media freedoms. And our report highlighted that public trust in the credibility of traditional media is also declining. So globally, we're seeing trends of delegitimizing the work of journalists, the rise of discourse around fake news, and a growing tendency for an intolerance of differences.
Some 262 journalists were jailed in 2017, with Turkey, China and Egypt accounting for 51% of the total. 80% of those cover politics.
Are crucial in all our societies to ensure the accountability of our governments towards the people. And this is not only a human rights issue. Without the pressure of a free press, the rule of law withers. And without the rule of law, corruption thrives. Public funds are misappropriated. In short, citizens are robbed of a better future. Without vibrant independent media, I simply don't see how we can ever achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and keep our promise to leave no one behind.
In a video message, UN Chief Antonio Guterres called the media crucial to building transparent and democratic societies. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Media freedom and independence, a critical pillar as part of democracy. Nelson Mandela said that himself, actually. Well, two journalists join me now, and they have been forced to flee their own country of home. Dr. Zweli Martin Dlamini, editor of the Swaziland Shopping, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And also one of our own, Ntakwana Ngatane, a broadcast journalist who found herself fleeing Lesotho as a result of challenges faced by journalists. Let me start with you, Dr. Zweli. Swaziland ranked 152 out of 180 countries in terms of press freedom. Not a great score. So it was very difficult for you to do your job there. Why?
Thank you very much. Maybe I can start by stating that in a country like Swaziland, where there is a dictatorship, there is an absolute monarch, it is very hard for the media to operate freely. In fact, you will note that Swaziland got independence in 1968. And by that time, there were political parties. So there was a little bit of freedom of expression, because when the British government handed over power to the Swaziland authorities, they suggested that there must be democracy, there must be political freedom. But as you will know, when democracy turns into dictatorship, the media becomes the first victim because of its power of influence. So now in Swaziland, almost all the media houses, I will state this clearly, are linked to the state. So when you come and start to exercise and uphold the true values of journalism, to hold those in power accountable, then you become a target.
So the moment you say anything that's critical you're under threat.
You're under threat, especially when you try to criticize or expose corruption that involves the king or his allies, government authorities, princes, princesses. All those who are linked to the king are untouchable. So, in my case, I exposed a man who was almost like the king's right-hand man. The famous Victor Kamet, the Mbabane Swallows boss.
Right.
He established a company. Can you imagine a company that is a 1-year-old, established within a year, to win a license, beating other international telecoms companies? A company that has never operated anywhere. It was just on paper. So that in that case, as I investigate the story, I discovered that this businessman and his links with the royal family, public funds were used to open the company.
All right, we're going to get deeper into that story because I do want to bring my colleague here in as well. Ntakwana, you had to leave Lesotho. They're 68 out of 180 countries. So in theory, things should be better there. Are things getting worse now? What's happening? Why would a journalist like you have to leave your country?
Well, before I go to Lesotho, I have to remind you that Swaziland is now Eswatini.
Yes,
according
of course.
to what the king is. But Peter, I think the main problem in Lesotho is not even the authorities per se. Perhaps the authorities now have come to understand the power that goes with ensuring that the media enjoys its freedom in the country. You still have draconian laws, but it is the freedom of other people that encroaches on the media that the government does not check, that becomes a problem. And I'll have to state my case, where people who I believe thought had the favor of the government thought they were free enough to go on social media and call me and basically threaten me. And I was in a position where I couldn't call on the government to say, well, these are your people, you can see them, you know. So in the absence of laws that make it impossible for you as a journalist or as a media practitioner to be threatened or to be in danger, that's where the problem becomes.
And this is quite a concern. You know, a report out from Burundi this week, they have closed down the BBC and the Voice of America that broadcast in the country in one of the local languages, Kinyarwanda. And this is in the lead up to a very important referendum on whether the president should be allowed to extend his stay in office. And so it's a continent-wide challenge, isn't it, that we're facing, journalists that are facing?
I think so. I mean, if I can go back to the issue of Lesotho, for instance, the thing that got me into trouble was reporting various views, I think, of what people thought would have led to the death of the Prime Minister's second wife, estranged second wife. And some of the people were saying that it might have had something to do with people who didn't want her to make it difficult for the Prime Minister because she wanted to be still recognized as a First Lady because they were not officially divorced. Now, the issue then becomes, is the third wife involved? Some people then start saying, could the third wife be involved? And others say not. But those who speak out for the voice that says, no, the third wife is not involved, believe that you saying that some say she might be involved clearly says that you then are implicating her. Now, as a result of that, you're dealing with an individual who now, Peter, as we speak, members of the Prime Minister's party, some of his allies in the coalition are now complaining because of the utterances that she's been making and the encroachment that she's been making on the government itself, saying that, in fact, she now is a person who seems to be exercising the powers that were bestowed on the Prime Minister by the votes of the people. So now that they feel that somebody should be speaking against that, suddenly they want the media to speak out. When before, when you were saying, well, hang on, you know, she should not be doing ABC as the First Lady, but that is the role of the Prime Minister, you were the villain.
Okay, it's quite concerning, and in fact we've got another journalist who's on the continent who's actually been jailed and released recently. Let's catch up with his story and just get another sense of the challenges that journalists are facing.
It is difficult to read 48-year-old Eskinder Nega's emotions by just looking at him. His answer to my first question, however, easily reveals the man behind a trademark baseball cap. After 6 years behind bars, finally, freedom. How does it feel to be free?
Well, I'm free personally, but my country is not free. So it's mixed emotions.
Brave. Are you just a rabble-rouser, or what is this fearlessness about?
Well, it's about freedom. It's about human dignity. Ultimately, it's about our dignity. This question about the choice between development and freedom. If there is indeed this choice, if there is indeed a choice between development and freedom, I'm sure a majority of our people will opt for freedom. Not only Ethiopia, by the way, in any human setting.
He has been jailed 8 times in the last 15 years for his work as a journalist in his home country, Ethiopia. His latest incarceration was in 2012 when he was sentenced to 18 years in jail for allegedly violating the country's anti-terrorism laws. In February this year, Eskinder was released as part of a large-scale pardon of hundreds of political prisoners and journalists. From his cell, the outspoken critic of the Ethiopian government has watched power change hands 3 times, albeit within the ruling People's Revolution Democratic Front. He's skeptical anything has changed.
We need a system that gives space to all shades of opinion in the country. That has not happened up to now.
While prison may not have broken him, one thing betrays his emotions. Because of being in jail, I could have done something, or I missed out on this.
My child primarily on a personal level. My child has grown without knowing me. Like I said, he was born in prison, and he spent the first year of his life without us.
He cites examples his country can emulate, where democracy has spurred free media and free speech.
Right, freedom of expression, democracy is possible in Ethiopia. There's hope. We're not ambitious. Let me repeat myself and say we're not too ambitious. We have seen democracy working in South Africa, which is very diverse, which has had very complicated history, and yet democracy has been possible in South Africa, and that's our model.
Eskinder now plans to set up a television station to continue his work in the push for free media. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, Kenya.
All right, so a challenge of being a journalist, and I wonder if the governments and authorities are not overestimating the power and the influence that media still has, given that we live in a world of social media. I'll put that question through to our 2 journalists after this quick break when we review our newspaper. Stay with us.
Shervin Brixby's SABC News, New York.
Paul Barber, SABC News, London.
Ntebo Mokobo, SABC Ufa go tswa mo Russia.
Neha Punya, SABC News, Saharanpur in Uttar Pradesh in India.
Other than that, I've enjoyed every single moment of it.
Takwana Ngatani, SABC News, Soweto, Johannesburg.
Welcome back. You are watching Media Monitor. It's time now for us to take a look at what's been happening in the newspapers. But before that, let's talk to you once again, Zweli, about Swaziland and your publication in particular. Your last one, Swaziland Shopping, went out in December. Yes. And you talked a little bit about Victor Gamedze, who got assassinated eventually as well, yes. Strangely. But just to get a sense of, what were you writing in your publication that incensed the authorities to such a degree that you had to flee the country? Was it not just the royal family, but businessmen as well?
Yes, the reason I focused on the businessman is that he was more like a very influential public figure. He was into soccer, he was in business, and he was linked to the royal family. And more above all, he was corrupt. So I find out that he was milking the state millions of taxpayers' money to establish his business empire. So in his business empire, there were different syndicates, including the media, that benefited from his dealings. So what put me in trouble is when I started to focus on him, his syndicate will come together to make sure that I'm sorted out. And this syndicate includes members of the royal family, government officials, the media. The syndicate was very huge. But what made the matter worse is because the last time I published a highly investigative article, the one I told you about involving the establishment of Swazi Mobile, it involved the name of the king, because the company was established with links to the king. So that put me in trouble. At the end before they closed the newspaper, I was about to publish another highly sensitive story. The businessman was plotting to become the president of Swaziland in the long run. But he was establishing his empire silently.
Are you saying take out the king?
To completely take over the country. He was in the process of establishing his cabinet, funding MPs who will stand for elections this year. But that was done silently.
So do you think that that's why he was assassinated in broad daylight and the police have done nothing?
Okay. On the assassination part, I wouldn't suggest that was linked to this. Okay. Because he has got many enemies. But what I can tell you is the man was very dangerous to the country. And I even wrote an article that he was more dangerous to the country. I'm going to
rush us along quite a bit, because you've been accused by the Swaziland Editors Forum saying we're very concerned about some of the articles that you published not meeting ethics standards, and that disciplinary action was initiated against you. So why are your fellow journalists saying this about you?
Okay, thank you very much for touching that aspect of the story. In January this year, I intercepted a document from the Editors Forum. They were about to hold a meeting where they were discussing that I should be arrested. And in the document, it is stated that they were benefiting from the businessmen.
Okay.
Part of the agenda they wrote, they were about to mourn the death of a member of the society who contributed to their personal lives.
Okay, so there's money changing hands. All right, let's take a quick look at our papers in front of us. And Takwana, let me start with you. What's grabbed your attention on the front pages today?
It's not necessarily on the front page, Peter, but it's inside the Sunday Independent. It's an article written by Professor Tinyiko Maluleke, who says, men are not trash, they're killers.
So this is the one that you've picked up.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
It would have followed the being found guilty and being sent to jail for 32 years.
This
of
is Sandile
Manswe on the Karabo Mokoena case.
Was he not psychopathic? Because I just did not get a sense this person had a full grip on reality.
Absolutely not. That's really how it looks. And but the sad thing, Peter, I think, as Professor Maluleke says, is there are so many men and probably women out there. There are so many people out there who are like Sandile Manswe. And I think one of the commentators that I was listening to over this past week was saying that the sad part is that if people don't believe that they're like Sandile Manswe, we're still going to get more of these.
Zweli, what caught your attention?
Yeah, it's the Tom Moyane issue.
Right. And this is in the Sunday Times now.
Yeah.
So this is the SARS commissioner. What grabbed your attention there?
It's with regards to the drama that is about to unfold. Because as you see, the president, when he campaigned to be elected the ANC president, he voted to fight corruption. And on the other hand, Tom Moyane is accusing the president of predetermining his case. So we are about to witness a highly interesting court battle in this matter, because when you look at the charges, they emerge from their misconduct, and they are very serious in their nature. So it's a very interesting case when you look at it.
Ntakwana, this is starting to look from the outside and without people analyzing these things, that if you lost at Nasrec, if you were on the wrong side of Nasrec, the chickens are coming home to roost now.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily so, Peter. And I think people have really said about President Ramaphosa that initially he did not intend. And I think, as we've seen with his cabinet, it doesn't look like he intended to purge people who were against him in the running towards Nasrec. So I think it is a case, what do you call it? It's a merit issue, as opposed to people being targeted just because they were on one side or the other.
All right, okay. All right, so we're going to leave it there for the time being. And I just want to thank you very much indeed for telling your stories. It's sad, actually, that you had to leave your home countries just for practicing your craft. But it is just one of those things that we have to keep highlighting. All right, so we're going to carry on chatting a little bit about the media, and coming up shortly in a couple of minutes, I'm going to be talking to the new public advocate. And if you're not sure what that is, if you have an issue with the media, you normally go to the press ombud or the press council, but there is somebody that kind of sits there initially as your first port of call, as it were. And this is where you first take your complaint and your concern, and if that is not sorted, it then escalates a little bit more. So it's with great pleasure now that I introduce Joe Latahomo, who's a veteran journalist with over 50 years in the New Public Advocate. As the New Public Advocate, he's now the New Public Advocate at the Press Council of South Africa, and he joins us now to give us a bit more insight about what his role is. Public Advocate, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so what do you do for me?
Joe Public, you're referring to?
Yes.
As my title says, I'm the public advocate. On the Press Council, my mandate is to assist the public in presenting or representing their complaints against media houses when they feel that they have been wronged by a publication.
So you're the first port of call, and so I might come and say the Sunday Times or the Sunday Independent or the Sunday Sun has invaded my privacy, or they've written an untruth. What do you then do?
Okay, first of all, there's the press code and various provisions within the press code. If in my view, any of the clauses of the press code have been breached, I would take the complaint present it to the respondent publication and request from them a response to the complaint. They would then respond to me either saying, yes, we admit that we did err in this particular case and we're happy to publish a retraction or a correction. I would then communicate that to the complainant and say to them, well, this is what the publication has offered. And if the complainant is happy about that kind of resolution, that's fine. Sometimes it requires a lot more facilitation and even arm twisting. But more importantly, I think it is important for me to say that the media has been very cooperative. Where they have erred, they have admitted very quickly that they have erred, and as a result, a lot of the complaints that have come through have been sorted out at my level.
What is the nature of the complaints that you're starting to see? What are the things that media seem to be doing wrong more of now than before?
I think the major issue really is the issue of the media accepting matters as being true, and particularly in the this age of social media, because it's been in the public, the media might often believe that it therefore must be true.
Okay.
And in most cases, it is not. And so, what appears in social media is represented as fact, and it turns out that it isn't.
We're repackaging social media.
We're repackaging
and a lot of
social
that
media.
is fake news.
Absolutely.
And we're not doing the homework to check.
That's correct. The whole process of fact checking seems to have been fallen through the cracks, and we try to encourage our publications to be a little more careful in terms of taking what appears on social media as fact.
So a lot of people will say, you know, the press are quite happy to put the initial story on the front page, but the apology on page 10 in a small little box. Shouldn't there be a reciprocal apology of the same size and stature? So if it's a headline story, it should be a headline apology.
I think that might be a little bit unreasonable. News is judged on the basis of what's on the desk on that particular day. And while the ombudsman would be able to direct the publication to publish a correction or a retraction on either with a teaser on page 1, but mostly corrections are placed on page 3, which is very
small and out of the way.
No. The ombudsman makes a determination based on that there's a hierarchy of sanctions within the press code. So, depending on the nature of the breach, the ombudsman would direct whether it's top of
we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but so glad to have met you, and I'm happy that you're there to protect the public, and that's where we're going to have to say good morning and thank you very much for tuning in to Media Monitor. Let's make a date for the same time next week. Thanks very much for tuning in.